The sky bled orange over the Wyoming plains, the sun sinking like a dying ember behind the jagged horizon. Wind howled across the empty land, whistling through barbed wire and bare branches. And there, tied to a splintered fence post like something meant to be forgotten, was a girl no older than 16. Her dress hung in torn ribbons, stiff with dirt and blood. Her wrists were raw where the rope had bitten into her skin, and her lips were cracked from cold and thirst. She didn't cry, didn't even blink, just stared out at the dying light like it might be the last warm thing she'd ever see. Elijah Boone rode alone, his mare picking her way through the snow-dusted brush along the northern fence line. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, but hollow-eyed with a permanent furrow across his brow. His coat was patched at the elbows, his boots worn thin. He didn't talk much, not to men, not to God, and he didn't expect answers from the land he called home. The plains had taken his wife, and with her the daughter he'd never gotten to name. Since then, the hills around his cabin had been as silent as his grief. When he spotted the figure on the fence, his first instinct was suspicion. Cattle rustlers, sometimes left poisoned bait out to lure wolves or trick old ranchers. But this wasn't bait. It was a girl. A small one. And she wasn't moving. He dismounted, his boots crunching softly in the frost. She didn't flinch as he approached, though. Her eyes tracked him, sharp, glassy, wide with a kind of broken awareness. He didn't ask questions, just took out his knife and cut the ropes in 2 clean motions. Her arms dropped like dead weight, and she slumped forward. He caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed nothing, just skin and bone wrapped in frost. Without a word, he hoisted her into the saddle and climbed up behind her, wrapping his coat around her frame. She didn't speak. He didn't expect her to. The ride back was a blur of cold wind and tightening dark. But she stayed upright, head pressed against his chest. His cabin was a squat, wind-beaten structure tucked into the lee of a rocky hill. Smoke still curled from the chimney. He'd left the fire burning low before heading out. Inside, he laid her gently near the hearth, wrapped her in wool, and started water boiling on the stove. Her skin was ice, her fingers stiff. He peeled, the rope remnants off her wrists, cleaning the wounds with shaking hands. She winced but said nothing. He offered her broth. She turned her head away. It wasn't until the fire had burned down and night had fully swallowed the land that she finally whispered, "He said I was a curse." Elijah didn't look up from where he was stirring the pot. Said I eat too much. That I ain't his blood. Her voice was raw, thin as thread and twice as fragile. He didn't press her, just added more wood to the fire. Later, as the wind beat against the windows and the storm rolled in, Elijah sat by the stove, sharpening a knife that didn't need sharpening. The girl slept fitfully on the cot near the hearth, fingers twitching in her sleep. He watched the flames rise and fall, his thoughts drifting backward to another storm, another night, 5 years past. The screams had been hers, his wife's, echoing through that same room, pain blooming in her like fire. And then silence. Too much silence. He'd buried her under the hill with their unborn child beside her, marked only by a wooden cross he carved himself. Now there was another girl in that same room, and this time he was listening. The storm lasted 3 days. She never told him her last name. Wouldn't say where she came from. He didn't push. Instead, he taught her how to stoke the fire, boil water, peel potatoes without wasting good flesh. She learned fast, silent as a stray pup trying not to get kicked. He found her once, crouched in the barn beside his old mare, whispering to it like it was the only soul in the world who might care. Each night, he checked the windows twice, bolted the door, made sure she had enough blankets. He caught her staring, at the snow sometimes, like she was measuring how far she could run before the cold took her. Then one night she screamed. Elijah jolted awake, knocking his tin cup to the floor. The girl was thrashing on the cot, eyes wide, arms flailing like she was being dragged across gravel. "No, don't, Daddy, please." He knelt beside her, hands out but not touching. "It's all right," he said, voice low. "You're safe now. Just a dream." She curled into herself, shaking. Elijah stood, threw another log on the fire, and left the bedroom door open so she could hear him moving around in the next room. Come morning. She didn't speak of it. Neither did he. On the fourth day, the storm broke. The land outside looked clean again, untouched, as if the wind had scoured it of every cruel thing that ever happened. She followed him outside for the first time. Watched him chop wood, then offered to stack it. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Later, she wandered behind the barn and found the 2 grave markers, simple, worn, half-covered by snow. She stood there for a long while, hands in her coat sleeves. When Elijah joined her, she didn't turn. Your wife? She asked. He nodded. And my daughter. Never got to hold her. Clara, because she'd finally told him that much. Nodded. Then softly she said, Then maybe it ain't just me who lost something. Elijah didn't answer, but when he went inside, he left the door open behind him. Snow still clung to the hills 2 weeks after the storm had passed, but the sky had softened. Days came a little longer, and the cold, while still sharp, was no longer cruel. In that time, Clara had changed, just enough to notice. The bruises faded. Her silence turned from fear to thoughtfulness. And while she still flinched at the sound of raised voices on the wind, her eyes no longer darted to the door with every gust. Elijah taught her the basics of ranch life, not in words, but in gestures, in patient nods, in the quiet rhythm of repetition. He showed her how to split kindling with a clean swing, how to mend wire so it wouldn't snap in the wind. Clara learned quickly, her small hands calloused before the week was out. She didn't complain about the cold or the work. If anything, she took to it with a hunger. In the evenings, they sat across from each other eating stew or biscuits or whatever Elijah had managed to cobble together that day. At first, Clara only nodded her thanks. Then, one night, she hummed a tune under her breath while spooning soup. Just a few scattered notes. Soft, tentative. Elijah didn't say anything, but he didn't forget it either. Then came the morning they found the sheep, 2 of them, torn open at the belly. Dragged from the pen in the dead of night, nothing left but tracks and blood. Elijah knelt beside the carcasses, jaw tight. Mountain lion, he muttered. Clara didn't ask what that meant. She just fetched his rifle from the cabin and brought her coat. They tracked the beast up into the hills, moving in silence through snow and pine. Elijah expected to point out signs to lead, but it was Clara who stopped first. Claw marks, she said, pointing to a gouged tree trunk. Still fresh. It's close. He stared at her, surprised. You've hunted before? She hesitated, then shrugged. Not by choice. She crouched by a patch of scat, wrinkling her nose. Still warm, she whispered. It's ahead, but not far. Elijah almost smiled. You might have been raised by wolves. Clara grinned faintly. Would have been kinder. They found the lion at the edge of a rocky outcrop. It had circled back on them, clever thing, and came barreling through the trees just as Elijah was checking his rifle, a blur of tawny fur, a flash of fangs. Elijah turned, too slow. Clara screamed, yanked a burning torch from Elijah's packfire, and flung it wide. The flame caught the lion's attention just long enough. Elijah fired. The shot cracked through the still woods, echoing off stone. The lion collapsed in a twitching heap. Elijah fell backward into the snow, arms out, rifle sliding across the ice. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Clara laughed, sharp and startled and real. Elijah sat up, brushing snow from his coat. Well, she said, catching her breath, guess we make a good pair. He looked at her, a little stunned. That we do. They dragged the carcass back between them. A slow, awkward journey, but neither complained. That night they ate by firelight again. Clara had dirt on her cheeks and a spark in her eyes. She looked alive. It was 3 days later when the truth came out. Full and sharp, like glass finally pulled from a wound. They were mending saddle straps in the barn, leather creaking in their hands. My mama died when I was 14, Clara said suddenly. Fever took her. Same kind that took half our town. Elijah paused but didn't look up. She used to sing to me, even when she was coughing up blood. Clara's voice wavered. After she passed, my daddy brought home a new wife, said he needed help keeping the farm, but she didn't want me. Said I was strange, said I didn't look like him, so I couldn't be his. Elijah set the leather aside, eyes still on his hands. She told him I was cursed, that I talked to animals, that I dreamed the wrong way. One day he just stopped speaking to me. Next he was dragging me out to the fence, said I needed to learn. She swallowed hard. I was out there 3 days, no water, nothing but crows and sun. Elijah didn't speak. Later that evening, as dusk folded across the valley, Clara found him outside, sitting beside his workbench, sharpening a rusted axe that didn't need it. His shoulders were hunched forward. His face was turned away. She didn't speak until she saw the wet trail down his cheek. I failed her, he said finally, voice ragged. My girl. I wasn't there when it mattered. Clara stepped closer, placed her small hand on his shoulder. Her touch was tentative, but firm. Then be here now, she whispered. The next morning, Elijah hitched up the wagon for a supply run into town. Clara stayed behind, tending the chickens, mending torn clothes. When he returned late that evening, his jaw was tight and his knuckles white on the reins. He didn't speak as he unloaded the bags. Not until Clara asked, "You all right?" He slammed the barn door a little too hard. Sheriff pulled me aside. He muttered. Said folks are talking. About you. About me. Clara stiffened. They think you're, what, dangerous? No. His voice was low. They think I'm a man keeping a girl like you around for the wrong reasons. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. He rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly tired. You'd be safer if you went. Her eyes burned. And go where? She asked, teeth clenched. Back to a fence post? The silence between them stretched. Then Elijah reached into his coat and pulled out a small brass key. Held it out. This is yours, he said. Cabin's yours, till you say it ain't. She didn't take it at first, just stared at it like it might burn her hand. Then, slowly, she reached out and closed her fingers around it. That night she slept with it beneath her pillow. The wind howled again, but it didn't sound as lonely. The days had grown quiet again, too quiet. Elijah noticed it first, a bad gut feeling that made him scan the tree line more often, the kind of silence that presses in before a storm. He'd heard the whispers in town, how folks figured he was getting old, keeping to himself. They said the ranch was barely guarded, that he lived with a girl who wasn't his kin. Some men hear that and see opportunity. They came just past dawn. 3 of them, ex-Confederates by the look of their coats, worn threadbare and black with soot. Hard men, eyes like glass knives. They waited until Elijah rode out to the southern pasture, leaving Clara to check on the chickens behind the barn. She saw them before they saw her. Shadows in the snow, bootprints too clean to be honest. They called to her, tried to corner her behind the smokehouse. She didn't scream. She ran, barefoot across frozen ground, thorns biting her feet. But she didn't stop. She sprinted up the ridge where she knew Elijah had gone, lungs burning, blood painting her footprints red. She found him hauling feed, his back turned. Gunman, she gasped. 3. At the barn. His eyes narrowed, not in panic but precision. He dropped the bucket, grabbed his rifle, and turned toward the ridge trail that overlooked the cabin. Clara followed, limping. Elijah stopped her at the rocks. Go back, he said. No, she breathed. You need me. And she did help. She laid out the spare ammo beside a fallen pine, loaded the rifle like he taught her, listened for their footfalls on the frost. The bandits came up the slope bold, guns out, one lighting a cigar like it was just a job. Elijah waited until the lead stepped into view, then fired. The shot cracked the morning silence. One bandit dropped. The other 2 scrambled. One returned. Fire, grazing Elijah's shoulder. He grunted but didn't stop. Clara picked up a slingshot she'd been using on coyotes, took aim, let it fly. It smacked the taller one in the jaw just long enough for Elijah to pull the trigger again. 2 down. The last man hesitated. Elijah's rifle clicked, jammed. The bandit raised his pistol. Then Clara screamed, "Behind you!" The hesitation saved Elijah's life. He ducked, rolled to the side, and tackled the man off the ridge. The fight was short, brutal. Elijah came, up bleeding, shoulder torn, knuckles raw. He didn't kill the last man, left him crawling away through the snow, arm bent wrong. By the time they got back to the barn, Elijah was pale. Clara dragged him inside, stoked the fire, and fetched the poker. "This'll hurt," she whispered. He managed a faint smile. "Figured." She pressed the glowing iron to his wound. He didn't scream, just passed out cold. She stayed beside him for hours, dabbing sweat, whispering old hymns, ones her mother used to sing when the nights got too dark. By morning, the snow outside was stained with blood, but inside, the fire still burned. Late that afternoon, a shadow crossed the yard. Clara stepped to the porch with Elijah's pistol, drawn, but it wasn't a threat. A man approached slowly, coat lined with fur, a bandolier across his chest. He carried the bandit, half dead, over his shoulder and dropped him like a sack of potatoes. "Yours?" he asked. Clara stared. The man was Lakota, broad-shouldered, weathered, his eyes deep as pine roots. He looked straight through her without blinking. "Elijah's inside," she said. The man nodded. "Name's Joseph Red Elk. Found this fool half dead near the stream." Clara didn't move, but something in her eased. Joseph didn't speak much. He stepped inside, knelt by Elijah, pulled herbs from a worn leather pouch, mixed salve with snow, and pressed it to the wound. Clara hovered nearby. "You trust him?" Elijah rasped. Clara looked at Joseph, then nodded. "He doesn't have to speak," she said. "I can hear what ain't said." Joseph stayed through. The turning of the moon helped repair the barn door, showed Clara how to snare rabbits without leaving prints, how to tie knots even a bear couldn't shake. He was quiet but kind, never asked questions. Elijah at first was wary, but Joseph didn't press. One night, sitting by the fire, Elijah spoke softly. "I buried my wife out there, and my daughter. Never met her. She died with her mama." Joseph stirred the embers. "The land don't hate you," he said. "The sky don't judge you. So maybe you can stop doing it yourself." Elijah didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. The snow began to melt. Sap dripped from the trees. And for the first time, Clara began to write. Just little things. Her mother's lullabies. The story of the lion. A recipe for biscuits. Her hands no longer trembled. Then came the day they heard horses. Official ones. 2 deputies. And a man behind. Them with a face Clara would never forget. Her father. He dismounted, arrogant, holding a folded piece of paper. "She's mine," he said. "Law says so." Clara stepped behind Elijah, heart in her throat. The sheriff, a different one than Elijah knew, looked tired. "Paper's valid, unless someone wants to challenge." Elijah stared at the man who'd left Clara in the snow. "You tied her to a fence," he said. "You lost the right to call yourself her kin." Clara's father laughed. "You think this is about feelings? She's property. I fed her, raised her. She runs off. She comes back." Clara stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "I ain't property, and I ain't cursed. I'm home." The deputies looked between them. The sheriff gave a long sigh. "She's of age soon enough. You want to drag her out against her will? You'll have to go through us." Her father's face twisted, but he wasn't foolish enough to draw. He turned his horse. "Spat in the dirt. She'll bring ruin on you," he growled at Elijah. Elijah didn't answer, just stepped aside so Clara could close the door. Spring broke across the valley like a hymn. Joseph packed his things one morning. "You leavin'?" Clara asked. He nodded. Your trail's your own now, he said. But if it ever gets cold, follow the smoke. I'll be out there. She hugged him without words. Elijah and Clara spent the weeks after building a second cabin, not behind the main house but beside it. Equal footing. The land had scars, so did they, but it breathed different now. One evening, as twilight kissed the hills, Elijah knelt beside the grave of his wife, laid a small wooden carving next to it, a child's face, smiling, holding a lark in her hand. For the daughter I never knew, he said softly, and the one I found. And beside him, Clara whispered something to the wind. Not goodbye, but thank you. Life on the frontier wasn't just about surviving the wilderness. It was about surviving each other. And ourselves. Clara wasn't just saved, she rose. And Elijah? He didn't just find a lost girl. He found purpose again. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What would you have done in Elijah's boots? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next frontier tale of loss, redemption, and quiet courage.